Good afternoon and welcome everybody to this Sunday sessions of 24th of January 2021, and there's a bit of snow here. Hello to you all. Well, welcome everybody to this Sunday sessions where I'm playing around with a bit of tech issues, but we'll get going. And thank you for joining me. As usual, this is our weekly time of exploring nature-centered folklore, connecting this within your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, crafts, performing, and any problem solving. Excuse me. Now, today's Sunday session is going to focus on one of our Ogham subjects. And this one is the Ogham Iona Scribes story. And there's a bunch of scribes for you. Get the pictures going for you. When the Gaels met the Picts, I've still got this tech issue, so we'll get around it. When the Gaels met the Picts and the scribes used their language, the combination, this is what I'm going to be talking about, because when we talk of folklore, even when we talk of history, this is going to be a little bit of history today. We tend to think in terms of the boundaries that we got now. There's England, there's Scotland, there's Wales, and there's Ireland, there's Northern Ireland. And we tend to think of those as being existing for thousands of years, which of course it weren't. It was very different even 1500 AD, and especially before 1100 AD. So I think we've really got to take the nationalism out of this to understand how this flows. And this is very important with this Ogham that I'm going to be talking about today. Now, my first connection with the Ogham symbols was during the 50s, before I was a teen and I was a wee lad. And then again, so much through the 60s as a teen, I dabbled with Ogham Divination in a toy-like way. And it was not until I met my stonemason boss on Iona, his name's Attie McKechnie, and this was during the 70s. And this was when I learned a deeper story of the Ogham language. And I've been passionate about it ever since. Now, if I can get onto this, there's Iona, just in case you hadn't realized. Come on up. There's Iona. And Attie was a mason apprentice during the 30s when the Iona Abbey was being restored. And he was a very fluent Gàidhlig speaker and extremely passionate about the language and its origins. And this was what Iona was like. This was like this in the 30s when Attie started working there as an apprentice. And Attie had a huge passionate interest in the way that the early medieval scribes used and changed the old Scottish language, because he loved the language so much. And it was through him that I learned the tree language connections and how they found a system of scribing from the Ogham. And quite amazing for me was to connect the Ogham on a Scottish pilgrimage island that hosts very few trees. There's a few hawthorn trees, a few small hazel trees, and a few imported beech trees. And there's the sort of village avenue, and you see a few trees there. And that's typical of Iona and around the parish church. I haven't got any pictures of that, but the parish church has the beech trees. Now, during this Sunday session, I'm going to tell you more of the version of the Gaels bringing the tree language to land that is, they called, or what was called, Argyll. And again, I'll remind you, if I'm going to get the banners up for this. Sorry about this. I'm very slow at the clicking forward because there is something going on. Maybe I'm not getting a very good signal. Let's see if I can get this up for you. I'm not getting the pictures and the banners up as quickly as I would like. So excuse me for that. And move forward with that. And again, I'm waiting for a few seconds for the transition. Here we go. Transition, please. Hello, we've had that picture. Come on. Right, here we go. I'm going to move on forward here. And I'm going to talk about what happened when they met the farming Picts and the rune style. You know, the Gaels had the tree language, and they met the farming Picts who had their rune style blade cut stone, just like that. That's typical of a Pict stone, and those symbols, and how the two tribes forged a language so that they could speak to each other. Now, this is how the early medieval scribes attempted to unravel this in a linear way, which must have been a hell of a job. You've got the Ogham, as you're familiar, goes from the bottom to the top, and you saw there a bit of the Pict style of communication. How do you put that describe that into a linear scale, style? Anyway, and what they did, the scribes, they actually preserved some of the roots of this combination to create what we know as the Gàidhlig language. That's still, of course, among a lot of people today. Now, today, I don't have any guests so far, but if you would like to chat about this subject live as a paddle member later, please use a link. I've already posted it, and I'll say hello to you in the backstage here. All you have to do is click that link on a previous comment of mine, and you can come backstage. Just follow it all. I'll bring the link up with the banners if I can get it through. Beat the sluggishness here. I should have a banner thing here. That's the one to go to. Go there if you'd like to join me later to discuss the stuff that I'm going to be talking about over the next half hour or so. So that's that. Let's see who we got here. Let's see if I can get this up. Hope this is not sluggish. Yes, it is sluggish as well. Oh, come on. Okay, we got Marcella. Good to see you. Hugely appreciated. Thank you very much. Like the sessions. This is going to be a bit different. Oh, it's interesting so far. Thanks very much. With snowy Wisconsin, and this is snowy County Sligo. We got a bit of extra today. I haven't got a camera to take you out to that, but thank you for joining us. And I will proceed with this. And good morning to the snowy. Again, I've got sluggish banners here, moving along a little slower than I would like. The transitions are very slow today. I think it might be the service itself. Let's see. I hope the sound is all right. I hope I'm clear enough. Everything's working from this end fine. Anyway, this Gael and Pict merging story is quite complex to explain. I've been racking my mind during the last week. Excuse me. Goodness me, it's not only tech problems, is it? Bringing back the memories, I talked about Attie McKechnie. Yeah, this evolution of the Gaels meeting the Picts seemed to be quite natural when you really look at it. As you know, I do folklore here rather than archived history. But this week I'm going to be sharing some watered down archive history along with a bit of the folklore. Now, on Sunday sessions, I've often spoken about the Gaels bringing a tree language to Erin, to what we know as Ireland now, and then on to the Era Gael, which if you say quickly, you come up with the Argyll in Scotland. So excuse me, I'm going to have some duplication with some of the points that I've shared with you in Sunday sessions so far. So I'm going to share a bit and intertwine it with other stuff this afternoon. And I'm actually going to be doing a tree language Ogham session. I think it's the end of next month. February is going to be very water-based, but we will have a tree-based because we're going to have a tree march, a session on tree matters. So it's a nice transition between the two. But the Ogham was not the only alphabet that started with trees. And perhaps I should reword that too, because it seems many languages were actually born from trees. Now, there's one profound act of nature that seems to give us clues to this, though it may be a storyteller's convenience or coincidence. And that is when lightning, again, let's get this up, when lightning hits a tree. This is quite a round tree, but often you see the trees and you look above and they take on a bit of a tree, T-shape, T for tree, T-shape. And these days we use words like thunder and Thor and Thursday. As I say, maybe pure coincidence. But there seems to be no Gaelic words for Thor and thunder. And Thursday is Duran, something like that. You perhaps a Daigen. You may be able to correct me on that one. Now it looks as if it started with creating impressions of trees, maybe with sticks or sharp stones, and making impressions with tree material in clay. And this is a modern thing, but gives you the example of the sort of thing I'm looking at. And another example, nice coincidence, transitions, come on. Another nice coincidence is how we talk of ourselves, our ancestry and our languages, as having roots and branches. I don't know how much of that you can actually see, but this is someone trying to explain the split up of languages using a tree. I think that's pretty neat for that. So let's see how we're getting on so far. Come on, let's release that. We got a few people commenting that's arriving. There's Catherine, someone calling someone else on, Jeremy. Watching from Coal Island, Tyrone, lovely, because there's some stuff that's going to be included that involves the north. Claire's here, lovely. She's either outside or in another room here. And Lishkin is saying it's perfectly sound. And then we got Donna in New Mexico, lovely to have you again. And hi from Leish. So great, lovely to have you on board. And now I really get into the roots of this story, I suppose you might say. Now, the Picts, they did have a scribed language. And it was a bit like runes. This is a modern runes thing, but if you know about runes, I would say, and that gives you a reminder of the sort of thing that I'm talking about. And this was a language of the Picts, because we're not, as I'll be explaining, the Picts weren't just one race. They were like an alliance of several tribes that came together, and I'll explain why very shortly. So this is why it's fascinating, why their written history is very unclear. So it's very much in the laps of storytellers. Now, who are these Picts? Anyway, as I say, they're a mystery. It's a mystery that's going to be debated forever. It's a real shaggy dog story. But the Gaels, they learned to write and archive their stories somehow, and so did the Saxons. So when the Gaels, they had their stories, they got into a linear form. The Saxons, they learned how to write their stories into linear form. And of course, the Romans did, because a lot of the folklore, even a lot of the pagan rites, refer to Roman linear writings, because that's what they did. But the Picts, they never got to the linear writing. They just, they got stuck on this stuff that we got here. Come back. There we go. That's typical of the Picts. And I'll give you another one here. That's the drawing of it. This is the Picardy stone. It's in Aberdeenshire, and it's made clearer by that diagram there. So that's about as far as the Picts, which makes them mysterious, makes them legendary. And they have some signs here. This is the Brunswick stone that's in Aberdeenshire. It's fascinating, black and white, to bring out the relief on that stone. You'll see typical Pict stuff there, but look down the left. There's symbols that look like Ogham. And it's very unclear whether it was the Picts who actually carved out the Ogham with their blades there, or whether some Gaels came along and did that, or whether the Picts learned from the Gaels about Ogham and they used their own axes to carve out something like that. But anyway, there you go. Emerging on the stone of the Pict symbolism, along with something that either looks like Ogham or something they learned of the Ogham. So the starting point of the Pict story, as I say, it's a shaggy dog story, because there was never a tribe called the Picts, as there was never a tribe called the Celts. and never a tribe called the Negroes. It's just convenient words that we use to group a bunch of people together, a bunch of tribes, sometimes races. And Picts is our convenient word to describe a bunch of tribes that came together. And they formed an alliance, and the reason for this alliance, it seems, was to defend themselves and be at a position where they could battle against enemy groups that were larger than in any of their individual tribes. Now, the Romans, they called this alliance, this tribe alliance, the Picti, the painted ones, which is the way they're translated. And there we go. There's some painted ones there. That gives you a sort of an idea. And perhaps a more popular interpretation of Picts is from the Latin word pact. And this is one I think that historians use more than anything. And that means worshippers of ancestors, or they were born from ancestors of the land, because on what's now we call the UK or the mainland Britain, people have been around since way before megalithic times, as they have in Ireland. And so any invasions, any people like the Saxons when they came over, the Romans, they saw these people that were ancestors of the land. So they were the Pect. So that was one of the names that somehow got picked up. Pect's not actually of Latin origin, actually. It's as if the Romans picked that word up from the north somehow, because the north had the word petter. And the ancient Britons themselves, and I'll talk about the difference between the Picts and the Britons. There's a pettus. I think I've got something up I can give you, which gives you the different spellings. See if that helps you out with what I'm trying to explain here. So there's that there. Now, the meaning of the alliance name of themselves, they actually name, excuse me, they actually name themselves the Pect or the Pict, it seems, according to the Romans, whereas the Celts, the Romans actually called the Celts the Celtoi. Very different. So I think that's interesting that you would actually get this alliance that was of what's now Scotland, I suppose you would say, and they would actually say, oh, we're the Pact or whatever it is, whereas the Romans say, you're the Celti, and you wouldn't get Celtic or Celtoi people say, well, we're the Celti, because it was actually putting them down a bit. But now people celebrate that. But the Picti alliance of small tribes to create a larger defense, in order to be able to be an alliance, it looks like they shared some kind of language. They had to. The tribes might have had different languages, like the Aborigines in Australia. There's something like over 800 Aborigine languages. So in order to communicate with your neighbors, they had to learn a unifying language. So there was somehow a shared language. And their language and cultural development seems to have traveled. Historians seem to think, well, it started in Brittany. It went up through Britain and went up into what is now Scotland. And the language connections of the Picts have been linked to the Welsh, the Cornish, and the Bretons. But there's another thread of research and learning. If I can get the picture up for you again. Now we go to Orkney for this one. And it supports the idea that the people we call Picts today started their population and their culture on the Orkney Isles. And this is the wonderful Skara Brae. Anybody been there? Absolutely fabulous. That it was a sand dune that got uncovered. And there they've got all this stone furniture, and it's all in place as if people just got out and left as sand dune came over, and there it all was, including cooking utensils, all kinds of things that are now in a museum because they get lots of visitors and they would just disappear otherwise. But how they got to how these people that we call the Picts got to the Orkneys is kind of unknown. And the theories are that they're a combination of Norse, Germanic, and even Scythian traders. There's an illustration of Scythian traders. And this is a sort of flow of the direction they went. And that's a bit confusing because this is looking at the idea of, okay, up through Brittany and then up from the south to the north. Whereas there's this new way of thinking saying somehow they crossed over to what's Denmark and to Sweden, Norway, and came across and from the Orkneys and down. And there's another Scythian story, and I'll probably share that with you, with the tree language, that said the Scythians actually came up into the south of Ireland and moved up there. But of course, you were saying Scythian, they're going to be an alliance of different tribes as well. So that's going to be split up. And this is what happened in ancient times. We try and group a bunch of people together as a singular culture, but really that culture splits up and becomes something else. And I'm going to be saying that with the Britons and the Picts, once the same culture split up. Now from the Orkneys, it seems like they quickly got to Caithness, and this was during the megalithic years, the Stone Age years. And they went right through Britain, as we know today, and then on to Brittany. And there's a bit of a map here. Doesn't really explain it that well. Come on up, map. Map! There you go. Oh, disappeared again. There we go. It's someone's tried to simplify it there, and they brought in the Dale writer. They got the Picts, they got the Britons there on the west, and the Angles, the Anglo-Saxons on the east there. This is quite a later map, because that red part would have been the whole part of what's England now. And the Picts blue would have actually come down a lot further. And in fact, they may have been in the west and going down onto Brittany there. Anyway, it just gives a rough idea. Now, I will be bringing it up. It says Ireland, but what became Scotland from the Picts, it was actually adopting the name at this time where it's got Picts. That should actually say Scotia instead of Ireland, because that was a common name, or Aryan, but a lot of people say that. Anyway, move on from that. The Romans and the Saxons may well have pushed their culture, as I say, far west of Cumbria, Wales, and now I've lost it. I've missed the picture. Never mind. So when it said that the Picts spoke Welsh, it may be that the Welsh, Cornish, and Bretons spoke Pict. If they started in Orkney and came through Caithness, came down, it may be that their language, actually the unified language as the alliance, came south as well. Because a lot of people say, oh, the Picts, they spoke Welsh. I'm starting to think by this new thought, it's the Welsh that are actually speaking Pict. The Bretons are speaking Pict. The Cornish, though not many people, hardly anybody talks Cornish now, they're speaking Pict. They're all part of this alliance. Even the Bretons might have been speaking Pict, or similar, and very different to this language of the trees that came up through Ireland, the Gaelic language, which is from the people of the trees. And that came into Gael. And it's lovely to imagine these transitions. Now, the timeline of this seems to be from about 8000 BC around to 1000 AD. So this is a huge transition of thousands of years of this integration of the Gaels, the Picts, and even by 1000 AD, this was Vikings as well. So they all kind of melted together, but still under the Pict name. And the Pict name probably existed from about 500 BC until they became integrated in with the Gaels before 1100. However, there's several things. In Ireland, we have the Tuatha De Danann stories. And to me, they're very Pictish as well. Maybe at another time I'll talk about this, because there's a lot of folklore in Scotland that say, the Tuatha De Danann are not of Irish. It's our Picts that went over, and they were the Tuatha De Danann because they were farmers. It was the links with the farming. They arrived in Orkney. Orkney was actually wooded, and they actually took the trees away from Orkney. Trees are now coming back to Orkney, believe it or not. About 10, 15 years ago, people started doing woodlands. They're doing great of native trees. So there were trees in Orkney, but they took them down. They did their farming. Why Orkney and not straight to Caithness, I have no idea. We'll probably hear about that from discoveries later on. Anyway, another time to talk about that. Of interest to us, this is an Ogham subject. is there preserved rune-type language, and this is seen all over eastern Scotland, Caithness, Shetland as well, Shetland and Orkney. We can see evidence of this. So it always, what remains goes down very much the eastern part of Scotland. If you've travelled there, if you go to Orkney and Shetland, not Shetland, if you go to Orkney and Caithness and you go down the east, there's a whole different feel to the rest of Scotland, even today. You go to Black Isle, you go to the little town of Cromarty, you go over to Moray, you go into Aberdeenshire, there's this whole feel of ancientness, I feel, that is very different. When you go to the west, it feels very Gaelic, it feels very Gaelic, and it feels very much like when you're in Ireland, I think, and you've got the weather that's similar as well. And there is that whole world, that Celtic world that you feel. But I feel when you go down the east of Scotland, it's something very different. It feels like ancient farming is what is at root there. I'd feel that anyway when I go down there. Maybe that's all part of when I talked about divination. But if I can, I caught up with you. The ancient language experts seem to link with the Welsh, Cornish, and Breton language. That's what I think we're talking about. Now, cutting these stones, I better talk about that. Using iron blades to cut the letters. And we can see roughly from the Ogham, and we can see this from other stones that we'll see probably through the session. The letters that we use, like K, W, V, X, Y, Z, Z, they're all, they're all straight lines that you can do with a blade. And these are letters that we do find in the Breton, Cornish, Welsh languages. They're full of these. But you go over to the Gàidhlig languages, everything is circular with the O's and the C's. It's very much part of the whole spiral circular thinking. So maybe that's something to do with a different feel, as I say, from the east of Scotland, because you're into the area where there was this crisscross alphabet that had appeared in relation to the Gael's more circular and spiral. It's a feeling thing that I'm talking about really there. Anyway, let's see what you're saying about this so far. Take a little break from that. Iona is a lot of people referring other people to come and have a look at this. And as I say, I'm trying to go very academic here, which is very unusual for me. Lovely to see you back, Big Bear, a YouTube follower. Fantastic. Margie is here. So people are still coming along and saying hello. So I love this. Thank you very much for joining in. I'm always humbled by your interest. So let's go into how on earth did the Picts and the Gaels come together. The Picts were settled farming people, as I've kind of been explaining in a sort of very fairy way of traveling down the east there. And even some of their symbols, very much into the cattle. You hear about as another clue, I think, when you talk about the Tuatha Dé Danann and their tales in Ireland, there's always cows, isn't there? There's always a cattle story. I suppose the most famous one is the Torn, but they traded with cattle. Cattle was their collateral. Cattle, how many cows they had, and it was all for milking, was very much their wealth, their status. It was all about cattle, and so it was with the Picts. Very much cattle people, animal people, which with the tree people as such, that when the Milesians came, for instance, and all those tribes at that time, cattle wasn't such a big thing with them. It was Breton laws. It was all about relationship with the trees. So we got this difference, and here it is on the Pict stones where they have the cattle. So that's one thing. And then later the Gaels moved in from the forest, and they came out of the forest and they learned how to be farming people too, because that's how they were guided. They say about the Tuatha Dé Danann from the underground helped them to understand the farming ways. But funnily enough, the Tuatha Dé Danann started bringing trees up. So things got switched a bit there. But with farming, as we know, it meant the need to invent farming tools and to make the farming easier, more productive. But as people were more nourished, the populations grew. So interest in land grew as well. And the increasing population needed more land to feed them, the usual stuff of the human situation. So it looks like they got to a point where they invaded the Breton tribes. As I say, over time, it looks like the people that were the alliance of the Picts broke away, and there was an alliance of the Britons. Similar, like in Ireland, there was the breakup of the Northern O'Neills and the Southern O'Neills. And we've still got that situation of tension. We've got Benbowen in County Sligo, and it's almost as if very much to the north of that, it's still very much the heritage of the Northern O'Neills. And to the south, although the Northern O'Neills really were Sligo and Roscommon and Mayo, but there's never been a united Ireland. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say, because there's always been that split between the Northern O'Neills that started in the Southern O'Neills. Likewise, you've got the Picts that were at the top, and then the alliance of the Bretons below. And then that's never really come back together again since either. So as I say, I think they were all part of the Picts alliance originally, but got this split. So some stories tell of the Bretons calling on the Romans and saying, look, we're being invaded by this alliance of Picts. And we're having a problem against this because the Bretons' culture changed. The Bretons, as well as farming, got into city building. And so when you got cities, that's where population goes. So when another tribe or comes to invade, what do? They hit the cities. And that gets the mass of the population. And that's how you convert people, I suppose, and how you actually conquer a country. But not with the Picts. They kept their little villages. They kept their little units. And I think this was a Gael influence. And whenever there was a battle, they would head for the trees. They would split up, and then they would come flying back out again. And for people who were used to battling people with cities, that was very different. So there were the city-building Bretons having a real problem with the Picts. So instead of the Romans invading, there's now thought that they actually invited the Romans to come over and form some alliance so they can invade the Picts, who were trying to grab land from them because of their own expansion. But of course, the Romans took over the Britons, drove them into the hills, drove the Britons into Wales, into Cornwall. So it didn't really work out too well for them. And maybe once they hit Wales and Cornwall, they became Picts, their old heritage again. But what seems to be unique, as I say, is this clustering into large towns that we call cities. Now, Picts and Gaels, the way I've told you there, what it reminds me of, well, as I was thinking about that yesterday, I was thinking, goodness me, what is it? Robin Hood, isn't it? It's very much like Robin Hood. There was the Normans conquering the Saxons, and some of the Saxons had their land taken away from them, and it drove them into the woods, into the forests. And what did they do? They kind of reorganized themselves. Boom, they'd come out. Any passerby, they would rob them. And this is how I think it was with the Picts and the Bretons. This was the sort of behavior. They'd come out of the trees, boom. And that's how the cultures combated each other. You might be saying, what's this got to do with Ogham? I'm getting to that. But even today, we can see this culture, this in the psyche of people, the way that people retreat into their woodlands, into their small units. They regroup and they come out more powerful than perhaps the city people. We have this urban-rural divide even now. But the Scottish people, especially in the Highlands and Islands, the one thing out of this, by being in small groups, small villages, in the way that they did, is they were very good, not only in making alliances, but forming co-ops. And I brought in some posters with this. These are old posters. And this is still a natural thing in Scotland, on the islands, in the Highlands. They still form cooperatives because they don't have big towns or big cities. They're still in little villages, in little groups, and they cooperate together. And I often wish, that this was more worldwide, because this works very well for conservation and efficiency as well. So I'm being political now, but it's, that's something else. There's another cooperative, the Global History, they're tea cooperatives. But when you get, say, like the Breton lifestyle, the urban lifestyle, the culture seems to be more on expanding businesses, expanding corporations, and of course we're always complaining about the inefficiencies of this and the effect on our environment. So this is what I was saying. You take history and folklore. How can you listen and learn by this? How can you apply that today? Well, this is how it was then. This is how it is now. Is there something we can actually learn by this ancient wisdom? I think that's what I'm trying to present today, really. But as ancients, the Gaels and the Picts especially, they actually did live as very peaceful farming people. They weren't as warlike as the storytellers and the historians would love to talk about. They had the way they organized themselves was with council mediation methods. And that was the way they smoothed conflicts. And it was very much in Irish folklore. I've shared this on the Sunday sessions, of the way the council, using the Brehon laws, for instance, can have mediations, and mediations creates the balance, and that gets rid of any conflict. But as the tribe populations grew into the larger tribes that formed the towns, the cities, to me, that's where tension grew. They didn't seem to form alliances in the same way. It suddenly became about acquisitions, I think. A very different way of going about it. So the natural methods of the Picts of being small and in groups and in council to decide things and being peaceful, this was not easily handled by the empire Romans. Romans were there to build empires. The Picts certainly were. They were there to build alliances. It's almost as if they were there to build small drum circles. They weren't there to kind of take over everything. They just wanted to shelter and to be fed. They were socialists, weren't they? So when the Romans attempted to attack the Picts in the open, as I say, the Picts later, in alliance with the Gaels, retreated, went into the woods, regrouped, came out, attacked the Romans, and the Romans just could not conquer them by the methods they used. So the best they could do was build Hadrian's Wall. And I got some Hadrian's Wall pictures here. Let's go with that. There you go. There's another one. And it's amazing walks, as you can see from there. And there's the kind of the map. There's some sort of map or away from near Newcastle over into Cumbria. That red line is where the Hadrian Wall. And the idea was they're fed up with the Picts. They wanted to keep the Picts out. And this was more symbolic. If the Picts wanted to, they could just jump over it, no problem. But there was this symbolic, please, we've had enough. The Romans say, we've had enough. Just go back to your farming. We're not going to invade you. We don't want you anymore. Obviously, your culture is not going to be part of our empire. It couldn't be. So that's, I think, what was symbolic of the Hadrian's Wall. And what I find interesting about the Pict stones, and here's one here, where we can gather some Ogham symbolism. In any of these Pict stones, if you go to Aberdeenshire, Moray, up through Caithness, Orkney, the one thing that's not depicted on the Pict stones is battles. It seems as if these symbols have something to do with seasons and their farming ways, which I think is lovely. And that was, that's their language. And it seems that their language kind of expressed and indicated farming. I'm trying to get some more up here. Their farming and peaceful life. And their farming and peaceful life really wasn't intruded on that often. But the arrival of Christianity amongst the Picts, that seemed to really change things quite horrifically. There's a Christianity Pict stone there. And it seems, in short, what happened is that what Roman warriorism couldn't achieve, Christianity seemed to move in to the Pict lifestyle, and they managed to convert them rather than war with them. But the Pict lifestyle was similar to what we relate to and interpret as pagan lifestyle. This is what they were trying to convert. Men and women, for instance, we hear this in Ireland, but it was definitely true amongst the Picts, even amongst the Britons. The men and women were both equals, and both of them worked on the farms. There's an illustration of some painted equals. And the men, though, when it came to defense and warriorism, it seems that the men were very much ahead on that. But it didn't mean they were leaders as such. It was still very much equality, because most of their culture was the farm and the seasons. And their beliefs guide their ways of living, like in Ireland, as we tell, was centered by a mother and earth goddess. And with the Gaels, that goddess and the she seemed to be through a center elder tree. There was the billy tree, and there's a sort of goddess wandering around the tree. So you got the Gaels, their goddess was in the trees, but with the Picts was on the land, and very much in the mountains with what we call the Cailleach, the woman of her womb in the hills, such as here in Scotland, and the mountains, and water flowing out of springs, wells, and pools from those mountains. I've got a couple of pictures if they'll come up. There you go. It's very slow again. So there's reverence for this water coming out of the mountains as coming out of the womb of the Cailleach. And even here, this is on the this is above County Sligo, and you're looking down on Loch Gill here. This is over the oh God, I've gone brain dead thinking the name of the hills. The kind of red hills are above. And there are these sacred pools there that it was believed that the spirits of the leaders would join the womb of the Cailleach in the hill there. Someone will tell me. We've got Ina, catch me up on that one. I've just gone brain dead on the name of this wee little loch here and the name of the hills there. Sorry that I've gone a bit cloudy on that, but Ina might be able to rescue me on that if she's still watching. And with Picts like Gaels, it seems the lines of leadership, though, they weren't today with Patrick. Get my pronunciations down there. Patriarchal ways. With the Picts, the maternal line was where leadership came from. The dynasty was not patriarchal like we follow today. Life and heritage to them always started from the womb of the person, the womb of the earth. That's where it started. And even though the appointed leaders were men, it was still regarded as everybody being umbilically connected to the Cailleach in the earth. And men, they would actually counsel women, the spirit women, to be their guides. And I think I've got an illustration of that here as an artist's impression of a woman guide. And it's also important in the Picts and the Breton time, like in ancient Ireland, there was no concept of sin. Like the Gaels and the Brehon tree-based laws, it seemed that the Picts worked through their issues and rights and of passages through counsel, mediation, and through retribution was the way they solved things. Now, Christianity arriving as it was in Ireland, it changed all of this. And the thinking of this seems to be like the right-wing causes of today. In my mind, Christianity attracted men and encouraged the men to hold more power. And like today, this created division from the feminine network of their culture, because the men were forcing a change to the feminine role in their whole culture, not just the women themselves, but the attitude to the Mother Earth. Suddenly there was this God in the sky, and men became attracted to the fear of generating powers of concepts of sin, which was being taught by the Christian Gospels, and using that as a weapon, a sort of a weapon control, I think, over femininity, over women. But having that said, it was, funnily enough, it was a woman abbess that first brought the strong influence of Christianity to the southern Picts. The northern Picts weren't having anything to do with this now, but her name was Gàidhlig. Gàidhlig, that's it. I see if I've got a spelling here, Gàidhlig. I'll bring her up and then we might be able to understand this a bit better. There was the Abbess Gàidhlig. This was about 350 AD. So she was the first one. And funnily enough, she was from Ireland. We hear about Patrick later on, and it's as if that's got the ball rolling in Ireland, that he came over and converted the Irish. But there was this woman, this Abbess Gàidhlig, who actually came from Ireland to tell the Gospels to the Picts. Interesting. So way before St. Patrick. However, it seemed she didn't really have that major effect. It turned out it was about the same time as Patrick, there was a St. Ninian, and this was around 400 AD-ish, and he is said to have converted many of the southern Picts, but this converting quickly caused friction and division amongst the alliance of the Pict tribes. There were a lot of the Pict tribes that were not having anything to do with this Christian stuff, and for many years there were many tribes within the Picts culture who resisted the Christianity, especially the northern Picts. They saw this divisioning going on in the south. They wanted to sustain their peace. They didn't want any part of that Christian culture. But along comes Columbkille. There we go, the Columbkille from Iona. This is where we get to the Ogham bit. Here we go, let's get him up. And there's a story told about how Columbkille, he was on the way to having talks with the North King Pict, King Brood. He was based in Inverness. And he noticed, as he was on the way there, Columbkille, he noticed there was a monster that was eating people. And this was actually in the River Ness. And there we go. There it is, a person that the monster is about to eat. And now I said Ness River deliberately, and this is a section from the Lamb Peninsula called Loch End, which is there, if you see on the map. See to the north end, that's where the Loch Ness goes into the river. That's Loch Ness to the south, the river's to the north. And there's a nice picture. That's a bit of the River Ness. And that goes all the way into Inverness. Anyway, Columbkille called the monster over to him and told him, stop eating people. There he is. Please, don't eat people. It's not a very Christian thing to do. And, well, the monster was actually enchanted by Columbkille, and he became shy. He got enchanted. Columbkille's enchantment turned him from being a people-eating monster, this is the story, into a shy monster, and swam on to the south and went deep into the loch. There you go. There's the shy. Someone got a picture of a very shy monster who's been very shy ever since. And of course, as we know, the Loch Ness monster has not been to any harm to anybody ever since. There is photography of it flapping away, enjoying itself, and our shy, harmless Loch Ness monster. Now, when King Brood actually heard this, he thought, wow, there's something in this Christian lark, because he knew of this monster eating people in the River Ness. And so he thought, well, what Columbkille's got, whoa, this is powerful stuff. And he wanted some of this. And so via Columbkille from Gaelic Island and the Pict Brood together, they set out to influence the northern Picts to actually become Christian, which is unfortunately, and this was a breakdown of the Pictish culture in a way, or a change, and they converted them into a much more patriarchal ways of the Christian movement. So there we are, he's doing a lot of converting and getting all the lads along, getting them to be a lot more patriarchal there. But as you can imagine, though the Gaels had merged with the Picts, this new Christian culture, it just increased their unrest. And the culture had changed from being guided by circular councils that were overseen by goddesses. There's a goddess maybe overseeing a council. And suddenly evolved into this God in the sky. And these circles became replaced by elitist linear courts who forced judgment, and they forced peace. It wasn't an actual culture thing. It was judgment to bring about fear, bring about the peace that was commanded by the male god in the sky. And sometimes I talk of yin and yang in plant growth in sessions, the feminine dark network of the roots, fungi, and life forms that share the dark underworld. And this being balanced by the highly competitive yang, individual male style fighting for the light in the upper world. But that's what balances plants, and that's how we get yields. But it seems like the ancient Pict ways and now the modern Christian ways was something a bit like that, I think. So you've got the Pict goddess against the Christian lad in the sky. It's a shame about the sin, isn't it? Anyway, what was needed was this alliance. This whole alliance was still needed between the Gaels and the Picts, not whether it's Christian or not. They still had to settle their differences and get together as a very united force, because they were needed to push away these lads. There we go. The Vikings, which was much bigger than the Picts, much bigger than the Gaels. Picts and Gaels had to come together against this force. So this Picts-Gaels merger did open the formation of a new country of Alba, which eventually took on the name that came from Ireland, Scotia, to become Scotland. And this happened when this lad came along, Kenneth MacAlpin. We're now up to about 843. He was probably the last Pict king, but he was Gaelic speaking. Although he was Pict, he was Gaelic speaking. He was Christian. He'd taken on the whole Christian culture, and so it was his reign. Unfortunately, it washed away what remained of the Pict culture, the Pict language, and the merging of Picts and Gaels was complete. Now, a few hundred years after the 9th century, as to say, under 9th century complete, but soon after the Viking culture took it all over, the scribe culture had been around for 300 years. So how the ancient Scoti name remained as the name for Scotland is that's a mystery to me, because here you got the Vikings, you got the Picts, and you got a little bit of the Gaels, but somehow the Gaels managed to enforce the Scotty name. Fascinating honor of how they did it. Anyway, I've been rattling on. Let's see what you have to say about that. I hope this is making some sort of sense. This is a whole new thing for me. Yeah, the equal society. Yeah, we're getting more. It's very much in the folklore, very much in the stories about the equal society, because that's what people long for today. It's what people are trying to work towards today. So people, again, look to the stories, look to the ancient references. Did this once exist? Because if it's like the tree thing, if it exists, then it's in our roots. And we need to feed from our roots where there is this network. And this is how we ideally want to be above the ground. So I think it's a great reference. It started off as a folklore, but I think from things that are being discovered and analyzed and looked at, it's actually starting to get archived into the history as well, that this happened. The leaders were still men. I'm going to talk about this a bit when we get on to Bridget's traditions. And it's funny when we say leaders, we think leaders today are people that take control, people that suppress people. And so it seems horrific that you have men in a leadership, king, imperial position, say, and they're there to bring about control on the situation. Even in Republican governments, it's mainly men, very few women there, and there seems to be control. My own interpretation is that the men were brought as leaders because, how can I put it? It's like that proverb, and it's sort of from China and from the East, that beside every successful man is a good woman, that a man wouldn't be able to lead without that guidance from the women. When men got into a circle, this is in Irish folklore, when men had these circles together with the Brown laws, and in the Picts it looks like both men and women were together, they would burn the rowan. And the idea of burning the rowan before they would hold court is to actually bring the presence of the female around them. Because if it's just a bunch of men around, they get revengeful, they get angry, they get pissed off. It's as if they need the women for the inspiration, for the calm, for the direction. So in a way, they definitely blessed the women of the earth, recognized the womb. They recognized that everything was umbilically connected. But I suppose if you take the Mars and Venus sort of thing, if you look at go into the astrology, the Mars is about direction. When there's actually a decision, it seems to be very much a decision seems to be a masculine kind of reaction. But you're not going to have a decision unless there is a unity. That's the way I interpret it. That might seem complex, but I think leadership, it was more chieftaining, was a very different kind of thing. That, in a way, is a whole topic in itself. And if anybody wants to debate that in a panel shortly, come on board. Listen, loving this part. Great. We've got a lot more to come. I am running late. Betty from Germany, and lovely to see Emmy. And I think I've called you up now. And again, I thank you so much for all being here. I'll be answering comments afterwards. But what did the scribes make of all this? So we're talking about now the Vikings have come in. You've got the Viking influence. You've got the Gaels, the Picts. You've all got this pulled together as a culture. The Ogham is still there, but the scribes, they're writing stuff in a linear form. So there you go. What did the scribes? There's another scribe picture. It really, when scribing got going, it was a very popular and lucrative industry. It was very much like home computers today. It wasn't that lucrative until Columkill came along, really. And stories of Bridget Kildare, as I'm going to be talking about years before Columkill. The stories with her, I'm going to be very brief because I'm going to talk about this more next week. But though she was a founder of femininity in many ways, and bringing a kind of a wonderful position for the femininity of the earth, she was really inclusive of what we might say the pagan ways, the Mother Earth, but trying to give a Christian slant on this. When it came to scribing, it's said that the scriptorians, that she only allowed men to be the scribes. Anyway, talk about that next week. And this was several years before Columkill. But before her, there was Patrick and other monastic founders, and they seemed to be very learned in Latin. They'd learned from the Romans. They were from Roman families, I think, most of them. And they really expected that being learned in Latin, that they would scribe records like the Romans did. But maybe they were slow at learning the Gàidhlig. Latin wouldn't have been understood in Ireland and where they roamed. So maybe they didn't see any sense in the archiving. I don't know. It's a mystery, but it's not known. But it was Columkill who set up scriptoriums, starting with Durrow and Derry. And that seemed to get this whole scriptorium movement going, because home computers, for instance, came into our homes in the early 80s. But there were computers around in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But people didn't understand them. They couldn't come into the homes, because if they did, people wouldn't know. They wouldn't even know how to spell QWERTY. I know with my first computer, it took me 2 weeks to learn how to get QWERTY up on the screen. I think a lot of us were like that, and that's the early 80s. So I think scriptoriums were like this in a way. When printing came in, when the first letterpress printing presses came, people hadn't got a clue what was going on. But at the turn of the 1900s, people had little printing presses in their garden sheds, literally. So it's the same thing. And I think Columkill was the one who really brought out scriptoriums, and it was a bit like when Microsoft set up an Apple and all these. The scriptoriums under Columbkille was like the Microsoft or the Apple of the time, and it was going to be very profound. And he was launching this from Iona, and this is where we bring it in. The great reference for them, if it come up, there we go, was the Ogham. The Ogham engravings that was from the Picts, and then you've got this tree language that was oral from the Gaels. And even the Norse people had some kind of mixture of the two that they could bring in. And I think it would have been absolutely amazing inspiration for these scribes to add them to the Gospels. They were adding to the Gospels. I'm trying to get this stone up. Adding to the Gospels and the Psalms that they were scribing. They've got all these symbols. Scribes were developing and teaching a linear language. But the oral people that they learned from, they didn't know anything about the linear. That whole thing, it's like sin. You know, the sin was brought in by the Christians. What the heck is sin? They didn't know the concept. And so these oral people didn't really have the concept of linear. They didn't understand starts and finishes, beginnings and ends. Everything was in a cycle because they understood the seasons went round in a circle. They looked into the trees and saw the cut trees and saw the circles. To them, that's how the world and that's how everything moved. But there you got this whole linear thing. It must have been really completely foreign. And how did these scribes who had learned linear through their Christian understanding, Middle Eastern understanding, how could they translate circle and spherical into what they were trying to scribe? So that was their main challenge. A bit like the computer people. How do you turn analog into digital? Similar idea, I think. So they went through this phase. And it's amazing how digital is trying to impersonate analog since, isn't it? So you got, there you go. Oh, we should stay up. There we go. Ogham was written and read from the ground up. That wasn't linear. I'm sorry about this erratic pictures anyway. And here's, I'll show you this one. This might show you. There we go. You read that from the ground up. And isn't that a bit like a tree growing? And this, going back to this leadership thing with the feminine in the ground, leadership at the top. You get the inspiration from the ground, from the, I loathe using the word energy, but literally the energy, inspiration from the ground upwards. And to me, that's what the orb speaks. You're going up the tree. The sap's going up the tree. In mythology, you've got the She, you've got the fairies who come from the ground, up through the water, up through the tree. And there you've got the language. And that to me is the tree language. And that's what they understood. Stuff of life doesn't go from left to right or right to left. But that was the convenience. That's what the scribes were doing. I think I got that one. So translating all that into linear must have been a nightmare. How did they do it? There must have been a lot. I think I know what they're doing. I've got these. I know how to do these letters. I'll just do it this way. So translation must have been very, very inaccurate. And then there was a recognition of the Pict symbol language. And there we go. We talked about that, some of it being like the Ogham. And maybe the Picts tried out Gàidhlig, Ogham, to add to their own. And I talked about this a bit earlier, because this to me is the image of the Bransput stone where you've got the Gàidhlig Ogham meeting the Pict language, Picts adapting it. You got a bit of emergence. A bit of a reminder bringing that one up for you. But Columbkille scribing was 6th century. And then by the 9th century, 300 years later, this was really, scribing was really advancing. They learned different inks, different ways of scribing. They had more of the Viking influence and the imagery. And then we get this stuff. This is how the scribing ended up. And it brings it all together. And somewhere in there is the origin of Ogham. Though we don't see it, it's quite incredible. Let's get another one of this. This is another. I think this shows it up. There we go. If you go to the Book of Kells, this is what we're getting. And the Pict culture and language fully merged into the Gaelic language. And this was all becoming the culture of Alba, which was coming on to Scotland. So where did all this Ogham go? The Ogham inscriptions were no longer directives, and I do believe, and we cover this in other Ogham sessions, let's go back to this to explain this. There we go. So I was talking about the inspiration from the earth coming up through the trees. So I think the Ogham was very much a divination tool at that time. It's what inspired. There wasn't linear language. There was just the spiral understanding. But so no longer were these Ogham languages, Ogham symbols being used as directives of inspiration. To me, they were now creating tools. Ogham was used to create tools of order and doctrine, which is what Christianity was bringing in, the idea of order and doctrine. So I've had a session on this. Ogham being used merely as what I call pissing stones, as I mentioned in another Sunday session. And the Ogham was being used to mark boundaries with names. Do not cross over here. And there's a cat on this worn out Ogham one there. Do not cross here. This is the boundary of our people, of our family, of our tribe. This was Ogham. It's almost become a weapon. And it changed from being a tree guide of the mother culture of the Gaels and Picts, and become a divisionary boundary tool of the new Christian path of the world, almost very weaponry in from divination into being a commanding slave. This is our land, keep off. And that's where I think Ogham stayed. And Ogham was used on posts, on boundary posts, up until the 1930s in parts of northern Ireland, north of Ireland, certainly in Scotland. So a lot of Ogham mystery has been picked up. It was used for boundaries, but there was a revival in modern Ogham when we're looking, what is this Ogham stuff? And what people are looking heavily into, and we have a session on this, I've done this, is the book of Ballymote. And this is a late medieval book, and here's a couple of pages. And then we see the Ogham has been put into a linear form by the scribe there. And but of course, when people get to this page, the pagans, the mystics, the modern pagans, they look at that and say, oh yes, we knew this all along. So that sort of speaks to them, and that shows the circles and the cycles that's related to. So there was some preservation of perhaps the old Ogham ways, and this was novel, I think, at the time of doing the book of Ballymote. But I present this as I say, in another Sunday session. Breeding traditions, next Sunday session is next week. I'm going to be, I've gone through a bit of dark stuff, I think, just now. So we'll have some more cheerful stuff next week. Just want to see what let's see what you're saying here. I'm glad you're enjoying this talk. As I say, it's out of line with the way I perhaps cover this. So I've struggled with it. I hope you've understood that. Sophie from Wales, Somerset, always wondered why the Oghams developed separately from runes. Are they related? If you, hopefully when you check back from the beginning, because this will be archived, I think you've summed up this entire hour or so, really, just from your one comment. And I think this is the whole idea that the Pictish language that they put perhaps with their axe blades and would draw out, certainly with metal, because they were iron people. One thing about the Pictish people is they were way ahead with iron, and they chopped down the trees. All these trees that they were chopping down for the farming made charcoal, made iron, and so they would have blades to cut this stuff out. So there they were stuck on the symbolic language. They never had a linear language, whereas the Ogham was the thing that seemed to feed into the linear. Ogham was from the tree language, as I was saying, from the earth upwards. And through the emergence of the Picts and the Gaels, somehow that two type of symbolism came together, that it may be the Gaels learned how to use blades to cut out their tree language. And that's how the Ogham alphabet came about as lines because they learned from the Picts. Oh, this is something we can do. So yes, I think there's an emergence. There might not have been an Ogham that we know today if it wasn't for the Picts showing how to cut out stone and wood with stuff blades made out of iron. I think that's where the emergence came. It was the iron that perhaps first influenced the emergence, because they were of use to each other. There were the Gaels, the tree people. There were the farmers, the Picts, but they needed tools. They needed wood to make charcoal to make tools. So there's all these things you can think of. People learning, tribes learning from each other. And that's how I see the emergence. So that's my long answer to that one. Who we got here? Sophie from Wales. We love you. And of course, Donna, love the kitty on the stone. Of course, I especially put that in there for you. Of course, Donna, fascinating. I've been mixed up about this. I hope I didn't mix you up even more, because we're still not very clear about it, are we? Boiling rowan. I didn't say boiling rowan. Burning rowan. It might be the way I pronounced it. Sorry about Lishka. It's about burning rowan to get the essence of the rowan, and because you would have a fire in the middle of the circle, much like we would have smudging. It's a form of smudging with the rowan to bring the presence of the female spirit. So sorry if I misunderstood with that one. And Stephen, thanks that you enjoyed it. Got a lot more people through YouTube today. Thank you. Sorry, just joined. Check back. Definitely try and see how I fumble through this. I hope you find it much more interesting than perhaps the last bit that you've heard. It's been fun, actually, though I've fumbled and the computer has been sluggish and I haven't had the transitions. But nobody's turned up wanting to do some paneling. We're going to have guests next week. It's going to be less of me, more of guests presenting the British traditions, breeder traditions, and we'll have a panel then. So it's just me today. Anyway, I go on to the formal stuff. I am still trying hard to work on this creating the She, Water and Tree folklore course. To take these subjects a lot further. And these sessions and the Labyrinth Gardens now are kind of free, but they have expenses. So I invite you to subscribe here. A lot of you are subscribers, and thank you very much. There we are. There's the Patreon subscribing. This does help because in order to present pictures and the things I do through Facebook Live and through YouTube and through Twitter, have to do this through subscriptions and have to pay bits. And there's other subscriptions just to keep the ball rolling. And there's the upkeep of the Labyrinth Garden. So this all helps. And as a thank you, I get all the people subscribing get this course, because I'm not going to charge a course fee. It's going to be forever developing. You'll get the videos. You'll get the podcast. We'll come together on little Zoom meetings to take this further. There's going to be a lot going on. So subscribe, there you go. That's the Patreon page there. Just a euro, dollar, pound a month or more. And the links are all over the Carrowcroy Cottage website. So I thank you for your support to enable me to, and Claire as well, to continue and share these projects. And I'll be given some assignments for you to do. And I'll message you to keep you up to date when you become a subscriber. So coming up in the next Sunday sessions, getting back to my pictures, if they work, let's tell you what's coming up now. Next week, as I say, we got the breeder, get a nice breeder picture up. There's some familiarity there. Breeder tales and traditions. And please join in with this. I hope to not be saying too much. A lot of the traditions you already know. Let's talk about them. Let's share them. Let's have a fun time next week. 31st of January. That's next Sunday. That's the eve of British. So you can get your breed brats prepared, your crosses sorted. We'll talk about all that next Sunday. And then similar is the 7th of February when I go on to, this is going on to the sidereal time, as I'm often talking about. The British day is really going with the Gregorian time, the more modern dating. but we'll go to Imbolc traditions on the 7th. It's actually Imbolc on the 3rd, but this is the next Sunday afterwards, so that's when we'll do that. And we'll do that with you speaking more than me. And then the 14th of February, as I say, February is going to be all about water because there's a difference. Breeder, we're going to be talking a lot about fire, including the rowan I was talking about and the hawthorn. Bringing that up, it's going to be a lot of fire related. Imbolc is going to be very water related, and the rest of the month of February is going to be very water related. So on the 14th of February, going into water dragons, serpents, and snakes, very much a folklore thing there. So let's have a look to see what you're saying here. Thank you, Marcella. Thank you for being around. Thank you, Lishka. Thank you, everybody. It's been a delight you've been around. I hope it made sense. Very different, not having the guest, just me. So a lot of you will be now watching this as an archive. So keep commenting here as you're watching this, because I keep coming back and answer the comments in the archive. Subscribe, click the bell icons you see on YouTube and Facebook. That will remind you of details of next Sunday session that's coming up. Enjoy a safe week. Keep it full of wonder. And right to the end, the computer's playing up. And I'm holding on here. I wish you a safe week. Wonder, lots of inspiration. We're coming up to the spring when the snow's melted here. It's going to get a little milder and wetter. Enjoy the enchantments that you see around you and feel around you. And until next Sunday, just play well. Love you all. And here we go. Bye-bye.